podcast where two longtime friends and sometimes a guest talk about their favorite games from the perspective of an average player. My name is Andrew Kimball.
And I'm Dylan Wren, and we are your friendly neighborhood gamers.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the neighborhood. We are rolling into Halloween, so we have a somewhat spooky episode here for everybody today, but I want to kick this off. So normally when it's been just me and Dylan, recently I've been kicking things off with a question, just kind of like a general gaming question to kind of get the conversation flowing, get the juices flowing, get us like excited and ready to talk. And we have a third person on this episode, and so I've gone back and forth on like, do we just use these questions for when it's just the two of us, or do we do it when more people are here? But I thought this would be a fun one to kick it off with both of you here. Before I dive into the question, I will introduce Aubrey is joining us for this episode. Aubrey, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing quite well. How are you?
I am fantastic. The question that I want to pose to you two, that really has nothing to do with the game we're talking about, but I think it's interesting.
I love it.
Do you think that gamers / nerds in general are too sensitive about spoilers?
I mean,
I feel like maybe a little framing. I feel like gamer culture especially, but also like, you know, surrounding Avengers, surrounding like animes, you know, TV shows, like spoilers are like the end of the world when people have their conversations. And if you listen to any industry level podcast, half the time they can't have the conversation that they want to have because they're dancing around spoilers. And so that's kind of what brought this to mind for me.
Yeah. Well, for that too, I would say some of those I have always assumed have been like review embargo type things where there have been particular parts of it that maybe they weren't allowed to talk about.
Well, I'm even talking about like game of the year conversations, like, you know, what was the best moment from the year? And it's like, well, I would talk about this moment, but it's a spoiler, so I can't.
I think for me, it's a little bit of a complicated question. I do think in general that a lot of times people are way too sensitive about, or not sensitive, but a way too like, they let some spoiler
like ruin their
day, and to me that's just very much like, guys, there are so many bigger things in life. But I will say I do understand when it's something that is spoiled without really their input. Like, I think there's a big difference between if I go and I click on a review or I listen to a review from a podcast and they're talking about spoilers, I sought that out and I intentionally chose to listen to it, versus like if someone's just scrolling on Twitter or something and all of a sudden it's like, boom, and here's a big spoiler that like is a twist on a recent game or something. Right. I can see how that might, you know, kind of annoy you because it's like, oh man, I didn't get there yet. Or even video game or movies, TV shows, that sort of thing. Where it's like, oh, Spider-Man, Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield came back. Like,
spoilers.
Yeah. But it is one of those things where I can understand like being kind of bummed that you didn't. And I know that not everybody has the ability to like watch everything and play everything right as it comes out. But I do think that in general there is like a month or two after, like the general, I make the general assumption that if you cared about it and really wanted to keep yourself spoiler free, you probably would have seen it or watched it, or you know, like
consumed it earlier.
Yeah, like I know the big reveal in Spider-Man Far From Home or whatever it is, or No Way Home.
Yeah, obviously.
Yeah,
you just said it.
I haven't seen that movie. I didn't watch it when it first came out.
Yeah, you were like one of the 3 people on planet Earth that hasn't watched that movie yet.
But it's one of those things.
The other one.
It's one of those things where it's like, I am not going to get upset if somebody mentions those things, because it's like, I had the opportunity. It's
very available
at
for
this
you
point,
to consume.
I think you get like a couple weeks to a month. And after that point, like people are going to be discussing it en masse on social media and just in general. And at that point, I think it's very tough to justify like, oh, well, I personally haven't, like at a certain point, it becomes like, well, I personally haven't played this, so you have to cater to me. Whereas when it's like it's first coming out, like Snape killed Dumbledore or something like that, like,
yeah, it's a big element of personal responsibility, I think, is where it falls. I think ultimately, yes. To answer your question, I think my answer would be yes. Like, people are too sensitive about it because you are responsible for your online experience. Period, point blank. You choose who you follow. You choose who you engage with. If you're following people who review games, don't be shocked when they talk about a game. If you follow people who critically discuss movies, don't be shocked or upset when they do that. Especially in today's day where like everything's tagged.
Yeah.
Like for every review I see online, there's like a spoiler-free version and then a version with spoilers. You choose what you click on. You have to curate your experience. And if it's tagged appropriately, then it's like in fan fiction, the dead dove don't eat thing from Arrested Development, when he sees that in the fridge and it says dead dove don't eat, and he opens it and he goes, well, I don't know what I expected.
Yeah.
It's like, well, if you're in these spaces where it's being discussed, why are you upset when you happen across it?
Yeah.
But I do get the like, yeah, opening weekend, maybe we don't discuss the big twist until everybody who's excited to see it and is concerned about it being spoiled can get to it. But also block those tags.
Yeah. Well, and, it's one of those things where on TikTok or Instagram Reels or whatever, however,
yeah,
whether you get that as it happens
you,
or 3 weeks after it happens, if you're on Reels. Most of the time what I have seen, at least in the people that I follow, is like when a new movie or game comes out, they'll be like, hey, this is going to have spoilers in it. If you don't want to hear them, like it or save it and come back once you've played it or watched it.
Yeah.
And I think that's just in general, like, I think a big part of the thing is being involved in like the zeitgeist and the discussion is such a big deal that people do it. And then it's like, yeah, well, when a reviewer is getting paid or, when people are going to the movies every weekend, yeah, it's a lot different than.
Yeah, but there was also nothing in Thor of Love and Thunder that was like to the level of Darth Vader is Luke Skywalker's father.
Yeah.
Like at no point was there like a spoiler in that movie that's like, oh my gosh, like that's a big twist that's going to like shake the universe. Like, yeah, if it was something like that, like Snape killed Dumbledore or something along those lines that dramatically shifts your perception of the world and it's huge like that, then sure. Or if your movie's predicated on that, like spoilers for a movie like Memento or
The Prestige.
The Prestige, yeah, something where there's like an element of mystery and how is it like all figured out, then yeah, it would be a jerk move to spoil that.
That's my thing. A couple things you guys have brought up as we've been talking about this is I think that most of the time when I know a story or am spoiled, it's like, well, if I was still interested to begin with, I'm still going to enjoy the experience.
Yeah. I want to see how it's brought about.
I think there's something to be said. Like if a story does a twist or a reveal or something well, then it is less important. I think about the movie with Daniel Craig, the mystery, Knives Out. Yeah. Where I've watched that movie several times and each time I'm like, oh, that's still really cool because I know who did it. Like it's a mystery movie. I know what ultimately ended up happening, but I still enjoy watching it because it's executed so well that it's like, oh, I still enjoy this. Same thing with like Darth Vader as Luke's father. It shifts your perspective of it, but it's like people still love watching Star Wars knowing that twist. And so if it's executed well in a game, in a movie, in a TV show, I don't think it matters as much if you have those spoilers ahead of time. Sure, it would be cool, like watching The Red Wedding without knowing that was going to happen, like the first time was a really cool thing. But also like, if you haven't watched Game of Thrones at this point and you don't have a podcast about it where the whole premise is you're trying to watch it with no spoilers, then like, I don't think you get to be upset if someone spoils it.
Yeah. Well, and again, like Emily specifically states, I'm doing this thing. Don't spoil future episodes for me, please. Yeah. Marvel puts entirely too much weight on that.
Mm-hmm.
I think to the detriment of their films.
Yeah.
The way that the actors have talked about, yeah, I was acting in a room covered in green paneling and they just filmed on me and I didn't even know who I was acting against and like really had to trust the director on the decisions I was making. It's like, I mean, you could be AI. Maybe not. Obviously, people talk a lot about Christian Bale's performance and how he did such a great job in Thor. And I do agree with that. But I mean, for heaven's sakes, let Tom Holland know who he's acting with. Like, that's super weird. And I saw today, and I haven't like chased it down to see if it was legit or not, but I saw someone talk about how Charlie Day, who voices Luigi in the Super Mario movies, didn't know who he was acting against. And that could be an animation thing where they didn't have the story fully plotted out yet when they were getting the voices. But it's also like, it's hard to make acting choices if you don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
And so it seems kind of silly to be like, oh, we're so concerned with spoilers. Like, Endgame. Yeah. Thor.
Super Mario
Hawkeye?
Brothers, the movie. Yeah.
Yeah. Obviously, they're gut punch moments. But again, if it's well done,
Yeah.
I mean, people still cry at the beginning of Last of Us.
Yeah, I
Mhm.
think as a culture, we've just
All 5 versions of that game they've played.
we've just gotten too wrapped up in it. I feel like
Mhm.
at a certain point, a good story is a good story, and
Yeah.
Mhm.
you should be able to talk about it.
Yeah.
The experience is still good. I think that it like you said, Dylan, there's a certain point where like it is respectful to let people know, like we will before we start our full conversation this episode, that, you know, we're going to spoil things
Mhm.
and give them the heads up. But also, like, there are a lot of times where I
Yeah.
listen to spoiler casts for games or whatever that I haven't played, because A, it informs my decision of, do I want to
Yeah.
play this?
Mhm.
Or B, like, it's just interesting. Like, I think the conversations people have where they actually talk about the full breadth of whatever thing that
Yeah.
they're talking
Mhm.
about is way more interesting and compelling than, we're going to talk about this, we're going to dance around everything that's actually interesting. And I think it is different if you're doing like a preview
Yeah.
or like a review on the day the thing comes out.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But if you're having a conversation about it as like a whole,
Yeah.
dancing around the most important parts is like,
Yeah. I think
Yeah.
it's unfair to expect that from podcasts or people who
Yeah.
are making art about a thing. Like,
Well, and I think there's just such a there's such a shift away from personal responsibility a lot of times, where it's like you have a personal, if you care enough about something that you don't want it spoiled, you kind of have a personal responsibility to try your best to avoid things. And at that point, yeah, if it does get spoiled, I can understand getting upset. Because like you were doing your best to avoid
Mhm.
everything, you were staying off social media, somebody just like spoiled it for you all of a sudden or whatever, or like, you're watching Jimmy Kimmel or something and it's like, oh, he made a joke that spoiled this thing. I can understand getting upset by that, but at the same time, there is a lot of personal responsibility. I chose not to listen to a lot of the conversation around the game The Quarry because I knew we were going to play it.
mhm.
right.
I did listen to a lot of conversations around The Last of Us because I don't care. I know the spoilers there,
Right.
And so I pick and choose what I listen to and what I don't. And if the people that you follow don't respect you in the way that you want to do that, like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
maybe don't follow those people.
I didn't watch Spider-Man and I didn't watch Endgame like the weekend they came out, and nothing was spoiled for me because I was proactive in avoiding those things.
Yeah.
Well, and on the flip side of that, don't be a dick and go
Yeah.
talking about weekend of, don't tweet about it with no tags or anything for people to be able to avoid the conversation who are trying to avoid it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, a
There's
month out,
there's a difference
it's
between
whatever.
trolling and,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it very much, like, if you're talking with someone that you consider to be a friend about something that could be in spoiler territory, be like, hey, have you seen this, before you just launch right into,
Do you care if I
have
tell
you
you how
seen-
it ends?
have
Mhm.
you seen the Star Wars? Oh, you haven't? Okay, well, I'm not going to tell you that Luke is
Right, because
Darth Vader's son.
You as the other person
Yeah.
on the other side of that conversation know that, hey,
Rey is a Palpatine.
your
Yeah.
experience will
Somehow Emperor Palpatine came back.
Yeah, Star Wars is a bad example for what I was about to say. Your experience will be better because I don't divulge these things. Whereas, a lot of times it's like, hey, have you seen this thing? No. Do you care if I tell you this? No.
Exactly.
Like, just the courtesy of asking is enough.
Exactly.
But no, I thought that was a good primer. It was one that I had queued up for a later episode, but I thought having the two of you here would be a very interesting kind of dynamic to break the ice on that one. If you looked at the title of this episode and you're wondering, when are they going to get to Cult of the Lamb? Yes, we are talking about Cult of the Lamb on this episode, and we are going to spoil it for what that is worth on this game. Like
as much as you can.
Yeah, the story in quotes is...
It's paper thin.
Yeah, it's paper thin. It's mostly like lore. It's kind of like universe, world building, etc. I did try to watch some lore videos to get an idea of what's happening, and even those were like, there's not much here. So it is what it is. But we are talking about Cult of the Lamb, and we're going to break down our experiences with the game, what we liked, didn't like. We're going to talk about the story. We're going to talk about the two different types of gameplay, and then we're going to rate it on our scale. But a little bit about Cult of the Lamb before we dive in. Cult of the Lamb is a roguelike action-adventure game developed by indie developer Massive Monster and published by Devolver Digital. The game was released on August 11th, 2022. It follows a possessed lamb who is saved from death by a godlike stranger named the One Who Waits, and must repay their debt by creating a loyal following in its name. The player must launch roguelike-style crusades and venture out into the game's 5 regions to defeat enemies and grow their following. The world, which is randomly generated and contains roguelike elements, contains resources to gather, perks and weapons to collect, enemies in the form of rival cultists and non-believers to fight, and other animals to rescue. These animals can be indoctrinated into the player's cult. They have appearances that can be changed and both positive and negative traits, which can affect how they act in the cult or how they react to the player's actions regarding the cult. The player can manage their followers at their cult's village. Followers can be assigned tasks at the base, such as gathering resources, building structures, worshiping, performing rituals, sending them to assist the player in battle, or sacrificing them, which can affect the player's abilities and the cult itself. The player must ensure their followers' needs are met by performing sermons and rituals to reinforce their faith, cooking food for them to survive, providing them with shelter, and ensuring the village is clean and sanitary. Otherwise, the followers can turn against the player, spread dissent, and eventually leave the cult. To prevent this, the player can provide for them, give them gifts, re-educate them, or detain them in a pillory until they stop dissenting.
So, like we said, there will be spoilers if you care.
Yeah.
And and you just want to know, like, do we like this game or do we not? I liked this game. I think I would recommend it.
Yeah, I would point people to our YouTube channel. Dylan did a very excellent review of this game over there where, you gave it an A?
Yes.
So, yeah, that is
spoilers.
A very good encapsulation of kind of the vibe of this game and kind of how we feel about it. I also like this game. I think my only complaints stem from the fact that I played it on Switch. So, as a game, I think it's really good. I think the Switch still has a few kinks to work out. But yeah, I would heartily recommend it, as I did to Aubrey, because I thought it would very much be up her alley.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I'm enjoying it quite a bit.
So if that's all you needed, like if that's what you want to hear, and then go get it, go play it if that sounds good to you, and then come back.
Yeah. It's like $25 on the Switch.
Yeah. I think it's like $25 new, and we're moving into the part of the year where games go on sale. So keep your eye out.
Spoilers.
Yeah. Definitely worth picking up
Yeah, for sure.
if you enjoy roguelike games and resource management games. It's a nice blend of the two.
Like we've already kind of teased a little bit, Dylan, you played on Xbox.
Yes, I played it on Xbox. I think I read some reviews tech-wise, and I kept seeing somebody say something about like there were some limitations and a lot of like slowdown on the Switch. And this was like the week it came out. So I think a lot of that has been fixed and patched for the most part. I think there's a lot more parity between the two at this point. But I chose to get it on the Xbox because I was just like, yeah, this does seem like a fun game to play on the Switch, but I feel like I would rather play it on the Xbox.
Yeah, I picked it up on Switch because, yes, it very much felt like this is a great handheld game. Aubrey is also playing it on the Switch.
Almost exclusively in handheld mode.
Same. Yeah, I played it on the TV very rarely. I played it after at least one major patch. That being said, when there are a lot of enemies on screen, a lot of actions happening, it does stutter occasionally. And when you are like traveling through some sort of a significant gate, or like if you're moving from a zone into a boss room, or from like leaving a zone to go to the little screen that lets you choose where you're headed next, or when you're coming back to your cult and like coming out of the ground, there's definitely like some jerkiness. And I don't know if that is, I don't think it's stylistic. I think it's the Switch being like, ugh.
Yeah.
So there's definitely
the load times are
load times are a little bit long too.
on the longer side.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But the management and most of the combat scenarios are fine. The only time I struggled and had to drop difficulty was the final boss.
Yeah.
So I was able to beat the game up to that point on normal with no like significant problems on Switch. So, you know, if you're listening to this as it comes out, I think there's been another decent patch. And if you're listening to this like in the future, sometimes it could be completely different. They may have completely polished it out, but you know, the Switch version of any game is usually the most inferior version, and that's the trade-off you get for playing it handheld.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is worth it for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I
may
loved
not
it
be
handheld.
if you have multiple consoles. Maybe pick it up on something separate.
And I will say, at least when I played it, even on Xbox, there were a few pretty rough like glitches. There were some that were like kind of not that big of a deal. Like in the base building part of it, the structures that give you wood and stone, like it was like the lumberyard and the mine or something like that, their names were switched, and so like you'd come back from like crusading and it would say your lumberyard's out of wood or whatever, out of resources, and I would walk over and both my lumberyards were still good, and then eventually I pieced together as like, oh, okay, when it says lumberyard is out, it means my mine is out, and when it says my mine is out, it means my lumberyard is out.
I showed you that screenshot I took of getting a quest and then completing the quest where it was literally the code.
Yeah.
Where the follower was their like speech bubble. Instead of saying like, oh, you're such a great leader, thank you for fulfilling, you know, my request, it was like follower request dash like, you know, it was literally like code. It was like if this then, you know. And I was like, all right, well,
okay.
I was able to like finish
peek behind the curtain there.
Yeah. So some of them were not really like that big of a deal. Another one that I ran into was I was messing around with like moving all of my village stuff around, and I was trying to like put down like a road, like a little path,
right? Yeah.
And then like further down the line, I like moved my stuff again, and like the path didn't go there anymore. Can't erase that. I can't. The functionality exists to like cover it up and put like just the regular grass back there, but my game never saved that. It always just reverted to like the original change that I made. So that like big things, not really. The biggest one I ran into was there's a perk you can get eventually that like when you die, it brings you back to life or something like that.
Yeah.
And every time I selected that perk, I could not be hit the entire rest of the time in that dungeon. Like the enemies just, they would hit me, but it wouldn't take health away. It wouldn't.
Nice.
It only happened like a couple of times, and it never happened in like I think it was when I was like going back rerunning dungeons to just like get resources. It was never like oh awesome, like I'm gonna beat this boss sort of thing.
Is that the perk where you sacrifice a follower to come back?
No, I think there was a card, a tarot card you could get eventually that like gave you a bonus life.
Gave you a
Gotcha.
And so I don't know. It may also do that with the sacrifice a follower thing. I don't actually know because I never did that. But we're
gonna get into
we'll get into that later.
Spoilers.
But there
Drink.
was like that seemed very game breaking to me because I was like, well, if it takes away my ability to get hit for the rest of this dungeon, like that kind of defeats then I can just do whatever. Like it takes away the whole roguelike part of this because I'm not trying to like dodge or roll. I'm just like running and smacking things because they can't hurt me back. So
game breaking in a different way.
Yeah.
Right. It breaks it kind of in a good way-ish.
I think a lot of that has been patched out at this point.
Probably, yeah. I want to move into talking about like we mentioned earlier, there's two halves to this game. There's the cult management and then there's like the roguelike action side of it. And I want to start with the kind of roguelike gameplay. But first of all, as we've alluded to, Dylan and I have beat the game.
Mm-hmm.
Aubrey, you're about halfway through. You're in like the second area.
I'm in the second zone. I'm like halfway through getting to the second boss.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm like I guess like a third of the way through.
Yeah. I will say, me personally, I found the zone that you were in, the second zone, to be the most challenging zone.
Interesting.
That was the one. There were a couple of enemies in that zone that I just never really got the timing down on.
Yeah.
And I found myself always losing a couple of hearts stupidly.
Yeah, there's a lot of like stuff that happens on the screen. Lots of enemies that either send stuff out at you or drop stuff on top of you. Yeah, it's easy to lose yourself in that run. But
yeah, the like enemies that shoot the like yellow balls of fire, whatever, those were like the bane of my existence and why the final boss was so challenging for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, speaking to that, the roguelike, what do we think of it?
I mean, I liked it. I thought it was a good... I personally think this is a good, easier roguelike. It reminds me a lot of a Hades style of roguelike, but Hades is definitely a lot more intense and a lot more, I would say, challenging as a roguelike than this one is. This one seems a lot more stripped down and
simpler.
Smaller.
Yeah, a lot smaller. I think is a good word for it.
Smaller runs. It does remind me more of like the Pokemon Mystery Dungeon games I played as a kid because they had randomly generated territories that you would go into. Now it was more turn-based. Like every step you took, your enemies would take a step.
Yeah.
And so you could like plot and plan a little bit more and it was not as like frenetic as roguelikes tend to be. But it did the randomly generated dungeon. You had to move through so many rooms to find the stairs to either, go up or go down and like move on through. It felt more like that than it felt like Hades.
Yeah. And a run of Cult of the Lamb takes, I don't think I had one that took over 15 minutes. I think it was generally like 10-ish. And so a good run of Hades, 45 minutes, an hour and a half, maybe, depending on how you go through that game. Whereas this, it's very much like, boom, you're in, you're out. Like, even if you have a bad run, even if you get a weapon you don't necessarily like,
you've still only committed like 5 minutes to the run.
It's a very quick in and out. And there's a lot less going, like the tarot cards that you get are kind of like the boons in Hades, but again, much simpler.
How do we feel about the tarot card system?
I mean, I thought it was cool. I don't know how much I felt like it ever was hugely impactful of how I was playing. I feel like most of the time I was still going to play mostly melee. There was, Hades, some of the boons you get completely change maybe how that run is going, because you're like, oh, I haven't been using my special, like move, or I haven't been using the magic thing. Like suddenly I'm going to do a whole lot more of that because these boons that I got combine in a way that makes that super powerful. But in this, it was pretty much like, oh, I got something that makes my curses stronger. Still probably never going to use that.
Oh, I use curses all the time. I like the tarot card system in theory. I think that you reach a certain point in the game where you've acquired most of them or all of them, and then it's all up to the luck of the draw. And it's like, oh, I could get something that gives me like a big health boost or some sort of crazy cool damage boost, or, something that really helps me on this run. Or I could get something that like drops fish.
Yeah. Increases the speed of my swing a little bit.
Yeah. And so I wish that it was
Handy with the axe.
more like an actual deck game where you could build a deck.
Yeah.
Like you acquire all these cards and then you decide which ones are in your deck, and those are what you draw from on your runs.
Yeah.
Because there were a lot of cards by like the last zone / end game where I would have loved to remove them from my potential pool, where like I would either do a run where I didn't have anything special equipped, or I'd do a run where I had that poncho that lets you just draw all your cards at the beginning. Yeah. And those 4 would be like drops fish, gives you a blue heart. Like, it'd just be like all these kind of BS cards. And I'm like, well, this isn't the run, know? And so I'd much rather it, like, if they would have let me go into my deck and been like, these are the like 15 potential cards that could drop out of the 30 that you technically own, I think that could have gone a long way to helping. Not that like we've said the roguelike elements are super difficult in general. You can just brute force your way through most of it. But some of the cards like make a huge difference depending on your play style.
Yeah. Like I can't tell you the amount of times that I would get the card that like shows you the map of the dungeon, or like every room in the dungeon on like the final zone of a run where it was like, well, this is pointless. And I go into every room in the dungeon anyway. Right. So like I didn't really
that
need
card,
this.
the fish card. Yeah. There were a couple cards that were just like, okay, at a certain point in the game, don't need these. I don't want to draw them ever. So let me remove them from my pool.
Yeah, like some of those were not great. And then some of them where it's like, hey, occasionally when you kill an enemy, you'll just get health back.
Exactly.
And it's like, that's game changing. That makes or breaks a run sometimes.
Exactly.
So, yeah, it, like you said, it's one that I get from like an RNG perspective, where it's kind of like a fun little thing where you're going through and it's like, oh man, I got the fish one. But at the same time, it's sort of like when you go in and you get like your choice between the dagger or like some other weapon that the claws. I didn't like the dagger or the claws really. And so it's
I
like,
could work with the claws. I did not like the daggers.
Yeah. And so I walk in, I see both of those and I'm just like, well, I guess I'm just going to try this run,
Exactly. I think that plays into the fact that, like we said, this is a simpler like roguelite.
Yeah.
And on one hand, that's good because it's simple. Like you only have so many potential outcomes, so many choices. But on the other hand, it's like, all right, well, if I don't like half or a third of these choices, I'm going to get those like half the time.
Yeah. Well, and I do think there's something to be said for it. Made there feel like, I guess there were less meaningful choices sometimes, because like you'd go in there every like zone, there's one room where they give you like a new tarot card. And you'd go in and it's like, hey, do you want this one that'll sometimes drop a fish when you kill an enemy? Or do you want this one that will double your damage? And it's like, I wonder which one I'm going to choose.
Yeah, Aubrey, as someone who's kind of still in the thick of it, how have you felt about the card system?
Right now, as I'm doing it, I did get that cloak that lets me draw the 4. And I am leading with that, because it does eliminate a lot of the like, okay, I have to check like every spot. Like if I find one that's like, oh, I'm on the golden path right now, I'm just going to keep going. Or if I get the one that reveals the map, I'm not in that zone, especially. I'm not particularly interested in checking every nook and cranny. Like I am trying to clear it.
I will say there have been some runs where I can have like 8 cards. Yeah. And so it's like, man, I'm like unstoppable now because I have so many, like I've built a decent build with the cards I've got, whereas like if I had that 4-card draw, like I would only have half of these.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's the give and take.
Well, and it just lets me know in advance kind of what kind of a run I'm going to have.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I get those 4, and again, I get like fish, but I see the map. But if my weapon's the axe and I immediately get the like, hey, it ups your speed 1, it's like, okay, we're in a pretty decent position right now. Like,
Yeah.
I'm trying to get into the habit of using the curses more. I'm a button masher extraordinaire.
You got to use them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there are some that I liked using, and then there were some that if I got it, I was basically just like, I'm never going to use
Yeah.
this.
Yeah, like
Like,
the tentacles to the 4 corners kind of one. Awesome. I'll drop that one all the time.
Mhm.
Even
Anything
some of
that
the like
does
the
a
projectile
static
ones.
effect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The ice ones were my like saving grace because they
Mhm.
slow down enemies.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one that like drops the poison sludge like right where you are. Like if I could launch that across the
You
arena.
can hold the button.
You'll get one of those eventually.
Yeah, if
too.
you hold the button, you can like aim it.
See, but I'm like
Well,
popping
there's-
through combat. I am
Yeah.
not I'm not a thoughtful player at all. When I do get like, hey, you've got the poison dagger, it does force me like, okay, slow down. Get in, get out. Like actually think about what you're doing.
I will say I never used the sludge pickups if I had another option.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just kind of and I don't recall if it poisons you or not, but it's
Yeah.
just, it's like one more thing on the screen that I'm like, oh God. Especially in this particular zone where it's so projectile heavy on the
Yeah.
opponent's part. But yeah, for the most part, I like it. I'm getting into a kind of a flow state with it because I haven't, like the last time I played something this combat heavy was Hades. It's been mostly like Spiritfarer and Slime Rancher and Animal Crossing, and so I haven't had a lot of like combat heavy games I've been playing. And even with Hades, I was like, just swing so fast they can't hit me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't play defensively at all, which makes it harder. I will never ever claim to be skilled at these things, but for the most part, I'm making decent progress. But I am also to the point where, like, if my cult is like pissy at me and then I fail like 2 runs in a row, I'm like, all right, I'm doing something else for a while. Like, if my cult's like content with me and then I fail 2 runs in a row, I'm like, I'm gonna go play that little dice game and maybe do some fishing, and then I'll be like ready for another run. But like, if my cult's pissed and then I fail a run and I come back and it's like, oh well, this guy's at his center now and he's all grumpy, I'm like, all right, you're getting sacrificed. Let's go back into the dungeon. Like,
oh, I can't wait to get to that part of the conversation. Yeah.
like,
I guess the last thing on the roguelike is, how do we feel about like the rewards for running through them? Like, obviously you have to run through them to progress the narrative and beat the bosses, but like going through and getting more money, wood, things like that, like, do we feel like it was rewarding to go, like, would you go through them if it wasn't narratively required?
There were definitely times where I was trying to complete like a follower request that I would rerun through like an older dungeon to do that. There were definitely some where I was like, oh, I need a bunch more wood for this thing. And in the base building part, there were times throughout where I was like, stone was the thing I was really behind on, or wood was the thing I was really behind on. And so I just needed to like go in and get some of this or some of that or whatever. And so there were times where I would just rerun through like an older one, and it kind of functions like Slay the Spire or something like that, where in between each zone, like when you complete a zone, it opens up to like, here's 2 or 3 options of like where you can go next. And some of them are more zones where you can earn tarot cards and weapons. And then some of them are like, here's a little like forest hollow where you can chop down all the trees and just get a bunch of wood.
Yeah.
And so I would run through and I would be like, that's what I'm doing. I'm instead of going through trying to be as powerful as possible so that I can beat the boss, I'm going through
and just grabbing as many resources as possible. Especially once you get the perk where you can leave the dungeon and you only lose like 15% of what you collect.
And I for sure did that when I was trying to beat the final boss, because you have to maintain 20 followers.
Yeah.
And we can say it here. I was trying to think if there's a better place in the episode to talk about it, but I got to the point with my attempts against the final boss where I just saved right before I went into the boss. And then if I failed, I just killed the game.
Yeah.
Quit the game. Because when you go into the final boss, Aubrey, just a little heads up, you have to have 20 followers. You go in, you do a ritual. Your 20 followers give you like, their loyalty or whatever, and it lets you go into the boss fight. Then you go through like 3 phases of this fight. And if you fail, you get spit back out. And when you fail a run of like just a normal, the roguelike section, you come back and it's like, oh, your followers are upset that you failed that crusade, whatever. But it's like time has passed. Things have happened. Your resources have increased. Someone's older now, whatever. When you fail the boss, it's like it spits you back out, but it also, the game reads it as where you were before you went in.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's this kind of weird, confusing thing where it's like, okay, I have 2 old followers that are going to croak any second, but also I can't go buy another follower because time hasn't actually passed.
Yeah.
So it's like I have to go and actually do another run on the side. It's just like, it's this weird kind of awkward bloat right in that section where I just got to the point where I was just quitting out. And then I just got to the point where I dropped the game on easy and beat it in one try.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that is one thing that like is a kind of a complaint for me, is just that final rush. It's just, it feels poorly paced or constructed. But yeah, the rewards outside of that, there were lots of times where, yeah. Because that, speaking to that boss, it was like, okay, I need to go, I'm going to do a run and I'm going to go where I can get as many followers as possible. Then I'm just going to leave the dungeon. But even before that, it would be like Dylan was saying, where it's like, oh, I need some wood. Wood was what I was always kind of struggling to find.
Yeah.
And so it was like, I'm going to do a kind of wood run. And I thought that was fine. I didn't replay a lot of dungeons unless I had a follower quest. I wasn't just going through them for the heck of it. I think you hit a certain point, and it's similar, and we'll kind of transition into the sim part of this and the management, but it's similar to a lot of these games where it's a struggle to get everything up and running. And then you hit a certain point where it just becomes like a collection game.
Yeah.
And so once you hit that collection point, it's like a lot of the resources you get in the rogue-like sections don't really amount to much. You're just like adding to an already big number.
Yeah. Yeah, like at a certain point your cult becomes fairly
like self-sufficient.
And so you like there was a point where I was like at the very beginning of the game, I was always low on food. And so like I would run through and collect a bunch of food. And then I hit the point where I was always low on wood. And so I needed to like collect a bunch of wood. And then I think I hit the point where I was always low on like stone. And so I was collecting a bunch of stone. But eventually you hit the point where it's like you're fairly good on all of that stuff. And then it's really only money that you need. But like, you can just sell extra resources and get more money. And so I just kind of did, like, I was bringing in so much crops that I was just like, all right, I'll sell down to like 200 in each of these stacks and still have so much stuff. And so it really wasn't that big of a deal. And then like the only real thing that the game has to gatekeep you with anymore is like each zone requires a certain number of followers, like Andrew said, with the last one requiring 20. And so when you start getting up to 20, your followers age as you go. And so like when you have 20 people, someone's always dying from old age or from like you killing them. And at that point, it's kind of just like trying to stay ahead of the like, I guess I got to recruit up to 25 because I'm going to have people die or whatever it is. So.
Exactly. Yeah. Trying to build that buffer. Let's shift into the base management stuff. Personally, I think this is the better part of the two, or the part I enjoyed more. I think that the roguelike stuff was fun, but like we've said, it was simple.
Yeah.
I think that this is still relatively simple, but it doesn't feel that way at first. I think when they first drop you in, it's kind of like, oh man, I'm never going to get ahead. And like I said, there's that kind of scramble to get to like reach a certain point. Then once you do, it becomes like a collection game. And I think it is very interesting. It's something we're going to talk about after we finish this little section about like how you can get there. But yeah, Aubrey, what did you think of the base management kind of portion, or what are you thinking of it as you're in the middle of it?
So my cult is currently shifting from like the hunter-gatherer society into the like agricultural society.
Mhm.
Right.
And we're only able to get there because I finally got them willing to eat grass.
Yes.
Yep.
The grass perk was amazing for me.
Yes.
As soon as you
Oh.
can feed them grass and they're like, we love this. It's like, oh, now I can focus on way more things with my like
I'm sorry,
energy.
I just
Yeah.
need you guys to be okay with grass for like 10 days. And then life will get so much better.
And they won't ever not be okay with grass. You can just keep feeding them grass for the rest of time and they'll be happy with it.
Yeah, because that was kind of the big struggle for me, or I guess what I zeroed in on in terms of like resources I was trying to get was food, because it's like pretty pressing. And so in that early game, like my whole clear of that first zone, it was like, all right, run the dungeon, come back. They need food. Let me go to the little fishing place and do some fishing and harvest some berries. And like, okay, I got a couple like plots going. Okay, I need to cook. Great, they've shit everywhere. Let me go clean up.
Yep.
Like, oh, and this one's throwing up because he stepped in this one's shit. And then
It's like having children.
and then you go and do the run, and then you come back and they're all upset because you haven't done a sermon in a while. And it's like, well, I'm so sorry. None of you know how to eat berries on your own. So once I finally was like, got it like enough fish and got them all like well fed for like 2 days, and I could start doing sermons consistently, and that brought their like devotion back up.
And then once you get certain
And-
like rituals you can do.
Yeah.
Yeah, got the rituals I could do. The feast,
Yes.
amazing, because I never don't have like
Bones.
I have so many bones already, and I'm not even like that far into the game. So
For me, it was, like you said, the grass meal perk, and then it
Mhm.
was having 2 like prison stockades for dissenters.
Yeah.
If I could lock those guys up immediately and I could feed my people grass, like once I got those things under control, then I could start to like actually build up the society as opposed to like putting out fires.
Mhm.
And then it was like, okay, now we can start doing the outhouse. Now we can do the farm.
Yeah.
Now
Yeah.
we can start like making sure everybody has a place to sleep. We can start doing the quarry. We can start doing the woodcutter's hut. But until I could handle the dissenters and the hunger, like those were the 2 big things early on.
Well,
Yeah.
and it seemed like everybody had the like faith grows faster if they have like some in an upgraded home. So I've got probably a dozen of the little like teepee
Teepees.
tents.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then a handful of the just the sleeping bags, because I just haven't gotten around to doing that because I've been focusing on more rituals.
Yeah.
I did that.
I didn't focus very much on like individual faith at all. That was not a priority for me at
Mm-mm.
all. The like little
No, I
characters' faith.
I don't like go and bless or do whatever.
Like when
And
they were
then-
popping off, I'd go collect.
Yeah.
But very rarely, unless it was like an easy, like, oh, you're almost there, let me
Yeah.
dance with you or whatever. I was like, I'm not, I didn't know the traits of my individual followers at all.
Right.
Yeah, no, it just seemed like I saw a whole bunch of them.
Right.
Like as they were coming in, I would like check, and I was like, oh, you're another one. Oh, and you're another one. I'm seeing that a lot. Kind of a not, yeah.
Now, when you get the maxed upgraded hut, which is similar to a lot of stuff, like when you can do funerals and when you can get the max upgraded home, then you can like collect devotion from each of those things individually. And that's what
Yeah.
I'm saying. It becomes like a collection game where you're just walking, like making a loop, collecting all your devotion from all these individual little spots. But yeah.
Very nice. Yeah, I recently got the funerals. Had to double back and get the body pit. I had like 3 bodies piled up in the corner for a little while.
I also did that. I like shoved 2 bodies like as far off the corner as I
Just
could.
go
I was
over
like,
there. Don't go over by the leave the bodies alone. Leave them
Yeah.
alone. It's fine.
Yeah.
You're just going to puke. Just leave
Just
it alone.
leave them alone.
Yeah.
I did, in terms of dissenters, like my first one, I tried to re-educate like
Yeah, I
consistently,
did
and that
too.
never works.
Well, you don't have
can't-
enough time before they.
Yeah, before.
Yeah.
So like the first one left, but not before making another one like pop off. And I like realized I was running around out of time on that first one. I was like, I'm just gonna sacrifice them. Like it's like we're just gonna do the ritual.
So you went to it like immediately. That's
everybody's
fantastic.
devotions. That like I didn't want to. Like I waited until the last possible minute, and to the point where they left. Like they left. They didn't get sacrificed, but they convinced somebody else to start spreading some nonsense in the cult. And I was like, all right, you're out. Which then gave me the follower meat. And so I cooked some of the follower meat and fed that to a dissenter, and that made them stop dissenting.
Mm-hmm. Oh, interesting.
Yep.
And then I tried that again with another dissenter, and it was like, didn't react to it at all.
It can make them super sick too.
Yeah, made them sick. I think it's like a 25% chance it makes them stop dissenting and a 75% chance it makes them vomit profusely.
I had a lot of follower meat stored up that I never cooked because I was like, I'm not going to risk it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so then it was like, you know what? Everybody's a little bit pissy right now. Let's have another sacrifice. Like,
yeah.
I don't change their names. I don't like customize their appearance. Like they come and they're there. They are who they are.
Do you enjoy the management, like base building, like resource management aspect of the game in general though? Like, are you enjoying that kind of putting out fires, trying to build your community part of the game?
Yes. Yeah. I think I'm just now getting to the point where I can actually start like flexing creative muscles and like actually
it's a little bit more
decorate
satisfying
and customize and potentially like focus. I'm getting a lot more devotion. I'm doing my rituals more consistently, and that's keeping the devotion up. And then giving me the like doctrine stuff that I can pick up. That's been really nice as that's been coming. It's a great incentive to like keep rolling back into it. I'm making sure I'm doing my sermons like first thing in the morning and then like moving on.
Yeah, I did a bunch of sermons at like midnight, and it was like, yeah, you got some benefit from this, but everybody's mad that you got them out of bed. And I'm like, oh yeah, I should probably pay attention to the time of day.
Yeah. I currently right now my gameplay is like first thing in the morning, everybody wakes up, we do a sermon. I look at the like overall food, and it's like, okay, let me make up some food for everybody. Everything's kind of square. You're all set doing your whatever. Collect any devotion in the shrine, and then go do a run. Come back. And then 9 times out of 10, it's nighttime at that point. Everybody's asleep. And then it's run around and do whatever. Check the devotion. If everybody's like in a bad place, if the devotion's really low or the general sentiment's low, it's like we're getting a sermon and we're doing some kind of ritual. And I like try to keep it to the feast or the funeral or something more like generally positive. I've only sacrificed 2 people, 2 dissenters. And it's not really so much for like I need the gain. It's more like just make this annoyance go away.
Yeah.
Knock it out. You're leaving either way. Like I don't feel like I'm going to sway you. I'm going to try and I've got some of the follower meat. I'll try that with you. I'll try re-educating you. If you're just determined not to listen, there's a lovely tentacle maw that will open up in the bottom of my temple that is just ready to accept you. So, and it will make everybody feel better.
Yep.
Because I've got them, I'm leaning towards like, don't fear death. Enjoy some grass. Like that's so far, those are my current cult philosophies.
Dylan, how do you feel about the base management stuff?
I mean, I liked it. I thought this game had a good mix of like you didn't have to spend a ton of time in either part of the game if you didn't want to. They were both sides of it, I thought, were deep enough that you could spend a lot of time there if you wanted to, but you didn't have to, and they're both short enough. Like, you know, there's never enough that you have to do around your base that it's going to take you a ton of time.
I was going to say, I feel like you get to the point with the like base stuff where it's like, okay, I've done everything I can do. Like I can walk around and talk to people, but like there's nothing productive left to do. I need to go do a run or play dice or do like I have to go do something else to pass time. Yeah, exactly.
Like you can just kind of like sit around. Well, I think you can like hold down Y or something like that. I don't know what it is on Switch, but to like make time
probably
speed
X.
Faster. And so you can like hold that down, like if you finish and you're just like waiting on some more wood to come in or whatever, you can do that. But yeah, like there were definitely times where I'd like just bumble around my base and then like go do some fishing or go do some dice game or go, talk to somebody else, and then come back and like do more in my base. And, next thing I knew, it was like an hour and I hadn't even been in the roguelike part of it. But then there were plenty of times where it was just like I did some sermons, got my people's like devotion up really high, let them do some drugs. And that like when they do the drugs, it just locks their devotion at a certain point. They can't lose it no matter what happens for like 3 days. And so I would just let them do that. And I was like, I'm just doing a bunch of runs. I don't care.
Right.
Like, you guys can starve to death and you'll still be happy because you did some shrooms. So
Exactly. The shroom guy that like teaches you how to do that literally ODs.
yeah, he dies and becomes a mushroom himself. Spoilers. So
Spoilers. Yeah, it's what a game.
yeah, but like I like the ability to kind of like go as hardcore into it as you want, or just kind of like bumble around, do a few quick little things, and it moves fast enough that you can automate most things without taking a ton of time. Like the first like zone that you're in very much is just you're putting out fires the entire time. And then once you get into the second zone, you start automating some things. You start being able to build, beds that don't break every single night. You start being able to like build an outhouse so you don't have to clean poop every time you come back from a run, maybe every other time. You start being able to build a farm so you no longer have to choose the food route. You can swap and be like, oh, okay, like I'm gonna get this follower because I don't need food, I'm growing food.
And then you can like add to the farm, you can add like, okay, now they can plant it and then they can harvest it and all I have to do is collect it. It becomes like at first you're doing all these tasks and the base management portion can be boiled down to I am converting the followers to do these for me and I just collect their work. And so that is like at first you have to pick up poop and puke. You can build things that make them pick up poop and puke or let them poop in an outhouse. Or you have to plant the seeds, water the seeds, harvest the seeds. Well, you can do a thing that lets them plant them, but then they can't harvest. Well, then you can find a thing that lets them harvest. And then you can put a compost thing that like you just dump the resources in and they use them to do the thing and you just collect. And so basically your work translates into letting your followers do the menial task and you collect the resources.
It's like compounding interest.
Essentially, yeah. And so like that is kind of the core loop of the base management. And I found it quite satisfying. And I was very appreciative of the fact that there was an end. I could hop into my game and still play.
Right.
But I've gotten my cult to the point where like, it's pretty sufficient. I'm just collecting stuff. I'm doing runs just to do runs. Like I feel like I have achieved the end. Like I feel like I'm there. It's not one of those things where it's like, forever or like just ongoing. It's like I wanted to get to this point. I got to this point. Like I maxed out all my upgrades for combat. I maxed out all my things. I can't put any more doctrines in my book. Like I'm done. I beat the game. I'm happy. That's it. And that was something I appreciate. I think that there's a lot of stuff in the upgrade book for the cult that I didn't really engage with.
Yeah, like there's the ability to build like demonic summoning circles.
I built that.
I built one. I never used it because I was never clear. The language of it made it sound like you had to sacrifice a follower to get it.
You do, I think, and then what I wasn't sure of was, is this a one-use thing? Does it stick with you throughout the whole run?
I think it sticks the whole run.
Because some of them were like, it will charge an enemy and explode or whatever. And it's like, well, that sounds like a one-time use thing. Like, why would I? So I never used that. And then there was like the propaganda speakers and like you could, once I built the sick bay, I had 2 like normal sick bays, maybe leveled them up once.
Yeah.
But like, you can level things up to a certain point, but I was like, I'm not using this enough to justify it. So I got to the point where I was just, I have points to spend. I'm going to try to unlock everything.
Yeah.
But I didn't need it for my cult to function. Like we were efficient at that point. And so I think that that's a pro and a con. Like it's like, it would have been cool to see this stuff maybe matter a little bit more, but also is like, okay, it's nice that I hit kind of this point and now I can focus on just beating the game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that is something that I do think is the discourse around the game that I've heard is sometimes people are like, well, I wish this mattered more. Like, I wish I cared more about my cultists, but like ultimately I don't really care about their perks or their name or whatever because
You're a cult leader.
Yeah.
You're a narcissist. You don't care about your cult members.
I mean, true. That's, but yeah, I mean, like, there's no reason to like rename your followers or really customize them all that much.
It does have a pretty interesting Twitch integration that I think works most of the time based on the little bit that I've seen it, where you can have your Twitch followers enter a raffle and then they get to customize the character and name them, and that way your audience can engage with you. But yeah, no, every single one of them has an outrageous, incomprehensible, unpronounceable name.
Let's talk about how we ran our cults, because you and I have already alluded to like sacrifice just being another kind of, day-to-day activity. And Dylan's like, oh, I didn't kill anybody. I'll start. I was very kind of not opposed to it, but trying to forego it as long as I could in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And then I basically, I got to the point where my cult viewed sacrifices as a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
So then it was like, okay, I don't feel as bad. And especially when like I was like struggling to keep up with deaths in my community from old age. It was like, well, I'm just going to sacrifice you instead. And then everybody's happy. They get like devotion from it. I get a perk from it. And I don't have to worry about burying you. Like, it was a win-win-win.
Yeah.
Well, 25% of our little ruined community here is not graves.
Now, when you say sacrifice the old people, is that
like the ascendancy?
The ascendancy, or was that the tentacle that dragged them down?
The straight up sacrifice. But I had a perk that made my cult think that was good.
Okay.
They were like, we like sacrifice. That gives us more devotion.
Okay. Because see, like I did let my older cultists, like I did try to ascend them.
I did have ascension as a thing that I unlocked at some point. Used it maybe once.
Yeah. I used that. I tried to use that for all of my older followers, to let them like ascend up or whatever. But occasionally, like, there's a cooldown on it, and so I just would be like, well, 2 of you are dying around the same time. I'm gonna send one of you. The other one, if you survive until the cooldown is done, you can have it too. If not, I got the little compost that, like, I chose one of the perks for my cult that allowed them to return to the earth, and so I would take their body and like and put it on the compost thing, and then they would turn into compost that would fertilize my fields.
That's even worse than sacrifice. Yeah. So I especially once I hit the point of I had unlocked, because the benefit to sacrificing your followers is that you can more quickly get abilities that help you in your crusades. So once I had unlocked all those, because it's a finite skill tree.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Then it was like, outside of just the devotion perk and not having to bury a body, like there's not really much here.
Yeah.
I also was very quick to throw people in prison, but I tried to finish every quest my followers threw at me. Like, I feel like I was probably a very solid, like, middle of the road kind of cult leader, where it was like 70% of people were pretty happy and had a good time. Aubrey, I mean, you're like mid-journey, but where are you at with it?
I am playing it like I realize is a personality quirk of mine, where I'm doing this for you. You agreed to join my cult. You agreed to live under these circumstances. And I don't appreciate you bitching and moaning about these circumstances when all you're doing is eating the food I'm cooking and pooping on the floor.
Right.
So when I was doing that like mad scramble of like, make sure you have enough food, let's get this sorted out. Like, I was initially like, let's just take care of everybody. Like, let's get this taken care of. I'm focused on your comfort. Like, let's get that taken care of. When I had, like I said earlier, I had that first dissenter and he ended up leaving. And then with the other one, like, I will try any kind of conceivable method to bring you back around.
Throw them in jail, then you can re-educate them infinitely without them having any negative effects.
Good to know.
That's what I did. Yeah. Once I had jail. That's what I said.
Yeah.
Once you build the stockade thing,
I will be
dissenters
collecting
are not
that
a
perk
problem.
and doing that, and hopefully not sacrificing anymore. But I do see like the very legit, like there's just a finite amount of space in your cult, and so you can't have. I mean, these old people be dying.
And the
like
old
I'm
people
running out
have
of graves.
The old people don't contribute at all. Like once they hit old age, they're useless.
They just kind of
they're just there.
Walk around with a cane. I think they give you some devotion.
It depends on some of your doctrines. Like if you have a like respect for your elders doctrine, then like
you can get a little
get
devotion.
some stuff. I would turn some of my older people into like
compost.
No, that was when people died. But like there was one doctrine or something where you could, or ritual where you could turn somebody into like your devotion collector basically, and he would go like, because normally you would have to go around and like dance with all of your followers or intimidate them or whatever to like raise their devotion levels.
Yeah,
and you could
you could make them like.
And so I would make one of my elders like that so that they could go around and like do it for me.
But like for example, you talked about the like the pit where you
the demonic
summoning. You can't use old followers there. And you can't send old followers on there's a thing where you can send them on like a missionary journey.
Mm-hmm.
You can't send old followers there. So like once they hit old age, they're significantly less useful to you as a resource than they were as like a young or middle-aged follower.
Yeah.
Which right now is whatever. We're chug-a-lugging along pretty well. I'm not super interested in like decorating my village to make it look any sort of way. I'm still trying to look for like functional upgrades. So I'm not so far needing like a bunch of wood or a bunch of stone. Like I've got enough that for the most part, when I want to build something, I have the resources I need to do that. But that's also because I'm trying to focus more on the runs and progressing the story a little bit, trying to get through that. That dice game is really fun though.
Yeah, I've enjoyed the dice game. It's also got a really catchy tune that plays in the background. I think it's solid.
Yeah.
Oh, another random thought though is the Rumble Pack.
I turned the vibration on the Switch down to like 15% because
I've got it down to 30 right now.
Yeah,
it's so much.
It's egregious. Yeah, and that was another like glitch I hit where sometimes it was like it reset the rumble
pack or whatever,
and it would be like I'd be in like one combat encounter where it was like at 100%, and I'd just be like, this is ridiculous. Then when I would go into the next room, it would kind of like remember my settings and it'd be back down to like tolerable. But that I think
is like a full on like like
yeah.
I'm just thinking like Rumble Pack. We've played N64.
Yeah.
So
I think the Switch struggles with that in general.
Yeah.
I think that unless it's a Nintendo game that's like intentionally taking advantage of the like HD rumble features or whatever, most of the time it's just like it's cranked to 11.
Yeah.
Left one more so than right in my Switch, at least.
At least Cult of the Lamb lets you crank it down.
Yeah.
Which is what I did like almost immediately.
But it's also the first game.
So obnoxious.
It's also the first game where I've been like, no, I have to go into like accessibility and figure out how to turn this off.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I've definitely had those issues in other games. But yeah, Cult of the Lamb was egregious. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Because there's a lot that makes the pack rumble. Like even just normal things like
just random interactions,
or like so
and then especially like it got distracting in combat.
Or there are times
it's like you're not giving me a nice little hepatic feedback that I've been hit, so I don't have to like keep an eye on my health. You're like just almost shocking my hand.
When I played Ashen, it was very much like that on the Switch.
Yeah, I don't remember that being as big of a thing on the Xbox, but it was also probably tuned a little bit better.
Yeah, and
like there's probably some different tuning between like Xbox, PlayStation, and Switch that maybe got overlooked or something.
The last thing that I kind of wanted to touch on is the story / lore of this game. As we mentioned earlier, there's not really much there, but do you guys have anything that you want to say about that?
I thought it was serviceable. You know, like it basically it boils down to there are 4 bishops of the old faith, and there's some sort of prophecy that says a lamb will bring back the one who waits. And so they've killed all the other lambs. You're the final lamb that they're sacrificing. They think that'll prevent the prophecy from ever being fulfilled. And then you come back. The one who waits is like, ha, joke's on them. Like, you're here. And so you become his thing and you go kill the 4 bishops who have locked the one who waits away to free him. And then spoilers, you fight the one who waits as like the final. Well,
it's kind of a Gehrman thing. You can
sacrifice
yourself, yeah, but come on.
Yeah.
Turns out the one who waits is the bad guy all along. Who would have seen that coming?
Yeah.
Well, and like, not that the bishops weren't bad guys.
They're all
like,
bad.
Everyone's also like, everyone was kind of a bad guy.
Yeah, I mean, half of your followers that you rescue in the runs are about to be sacrificed to the bishops of the old faith. So, like,
from what I gather, you are also just as bad. When you kill the one who waits, like, you're just taking his place. You're the new awful, like, ruler of this world. So,
but I was nice. My cult was nice. We didn't kill anybody.
Your perspective, your opinion.
Except for the heretics and the bishops.
Well, the self-defense. They tried to kill me.
You were running through their territory.
Not when they killed me the first time.
No, but you chose to re-engage with them.
Yeah.
I mean, I showed up. They attacked me. It was self-defense.
Nothing about the message of this game is necessarily good, but
yeah. I mean, and again, like, it's very light on the story. Like,
it's very light on the story, and I think that if this had been like a Unreal Engine 5 game with like humans, it would be very like kind of uncomfortable. But the tongue-in-cheek kind of goofy dichotomy of, oh, we're telling this kind of really dark, twisted sort of cult story, but we're doing it with like these cute little 2D woodland creatures. Like, that's kind of where the comedy and like the charm of the game comes from.
Yeah.
I do think that sometimes the art direction hurt my eyes. Like, there were some rooms that you would go in that are just like pure like neon reddish pink.
Mm-hmm.
And you would just be like fighting, doing your thing in there. One of the like final boss rooms was like that. It was the phase 3 boss room.
Yeah.
And then as soon as the screen would change to something else, I would be like blinking and like looking away, and like my eyes are watering. It's like, oh man, that was a lot. And, a lot of that is just, the brightness, the colors. And for 85% of the time, I think the like color palette and the art style was perfect and on point and like worked really well. Occasionally there was too much red on screen, I think is what it was. It was just like so much red that it's like when you looked away, your eyes are like, oh God, I'm confused. But yeah, I think that the art direction and like the kind of goofy farm animal, like wilderness sort of vibe mixed with the like twisted dark like cult where that is like the core charm of the game, and I think it works really well.
Yeah, because it's not like a hyper realistic anything.
No.
Mm-mm.
Cute little, and it almost looks storybook-esque.
Yeah.
Like, your character is 2D as you're running around in a 3D space. Like, really nicely done 2D, but it does look like a page running across another page.
Yeah, for sure.
And like, I would say there's more like story type stuff that comes from some of the locations you can go to off of, like, outside of the dungeons and the...
Yeah, there's plenty of interesting characters.
Yeah.
Like you guys said, the guy who teaches you how to craft the mushrooms and then turns into a mushroom. The guy who takes you through the tutorial, who was once chosen by the one who waits, and now you just play dice with him. Like,
Yeah.
there are plenty of interesting, like, neat little characters that you can bump into and talk to.
There's like some guy on like a ship or whatever that I think like I feel like he alludes to a lot, and then like you meet someone else who is potentially the person he was alluding to the entire time. But I'm not like 100% on that. There was a lot of just kind of like, oh, these weird wacky characters that all have like a little bit of a backstory. It's, surface level. If you're looking for a game to really dig into lore wise, this is probably not it. This is a game where it's mostly about the gameplay.
Yeah. And I will say the dude you're talking about on the ship was like my motivation to replay zones, because I did get him all the eyeballs.
Yeah.
Just to see. And on the side character note, I thought that probably 75% of the like quirky like voices were annoying.
Mm.
Oh yeah,
I did not. Yeah, I did not like the bird, like the tarot card bird voice at all. There was a couple that I was like, oh, this is kind of like actually kind of cute and entertaining, but most of them were just kind of grating to me. I don't know if you guys agreed, but
I feel like that might just be a you thing.
Potentially, yeah.
I think I saw them and I was just like, I have no feelings one way or the other about this.
Well, the
voice.
problem was like, for example,
I've also played The Sims, so like,
well, when you're in a run,
There's that.
when you're in a run and you go and you find the dude that like you can choose a different weapon,
and
you walk in and he's like, a thought bubble or a speech bubble pops up and he says a thing, and then if you just stay there, like you're still pondering which decision to make, another speech bubble pops up and he says another thing. Like they talk constantly until you've done the thing and got out. It's not like they have the one thing to say.
Yeah.
And at first I thought that was like a glitch, where it was like, because I thought that they were saying something each time I was getting close to a different like weapon.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, no, they just talk constantly until you leave.
Yeah.
Which I was like, all right, that's kind of annoying. But yeah, maybe it was just a little too ASMR-y, the like bird voice thing.
Maybe
it's just a little too like.
I will say I
maybe I'll insert a clip of like what they sound like, and you can hop in our Discord and let me know if I'm crazy or if it is kind of annoying.
I was gonna say at a certain point I was like, okay, there's not like speech, there's not like, I think I kind of just like turned on podcasts and listened to those.
Yeah,
while
I was about to say about half of my time spent playing, I was either getting my hair done this weekend, or I had a podcast going or something else going.
It is a good game for that. Yeah.
There's nothing
like, it's not Hades with like a fantastic soundtrack. It's like the music is fine,
good.
Like it wasn't bad music, but it was also not like, I want to listen to like,
or even with the character interactions being as compelling as Hades was.
Exactly.
Like I still want to like try and get Eurydice and Orpheus to reconcile. Like, I should
spoilers.
Keep playing that game in order to do that, but
well, let's go ahead and roll into our verdicts for this game. Dylan, yours has already been kind of spoiled.
Yeah.
It's on our YouTube
It's
channel.
on our YouTube channel. I would give this game an A.
Check out.
Yeah, I would give this game an A. I think it's a good game. I had a lot of fun with it. It's nice that it was, like, to me, I thought it was nice that it was, I think it took me 22 hours to beat in its entirety. So, like, I appreciated that it wasn't something that was, like, dragging it out. I liked that there were kind of those two distinct things that you could do. And so if you ever kind of got bored or frustrated with one, it was very easy to just go do the other one for a bit and then come back when you were in like a different state of mind or whatever. And I liked that everything felt like it had an endpoint. Like, you're doing all these sermons or whatever, but eventually, like, you kind of get everything, and then you're just doing sermons to make sure people don't leave.
Right.
You're building up your city, your little town, your settlement. You're putting out fires for a long time. Eventually, you're just going around collecting stuff. You're doing these dungeon runs, but eventually, like, you've hit it, and there's not like that, like Hades is like, cool, you beat it. Now beat it like 7 more times. Whereas this, I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Like, I beat it. I don't need to keep playing it. I enjoyed my time, and I feel good about putting it down. So for me, it was an A. If you're into roguelikes, or you like the idea of roguelikes, if you like the idea of Hades, but maybe it was a little too tough, like, check this out. Like, this is an easier way to get your feet wet in the roguelike. And even if you haven't, like, it's not, I don't think this is as intimidating as a lot of the other types of these games that are out there. I think this is a good, easier, but still very fun and rewarding game.
Yeah, and based on what my experience with the final boss switching to easy, if you play this game on easy, it is a pretty casual experience, I think. So, like, if that's what you're looking for, it's there. I think I would give this game a B, and we haven't mentioned it, but, like, we review and rate our games on the, like, A through F, like school grading scale, with S being God mode. So it is like S through F. And for me, I'm going to go B. I think part of that might be the Switch's fault because there were some like hiccups here and there. I think that the end boss and like the end grind is a little bit clunky and frustrating. I think there's a lot of things in the game that you don't necessarily have to engage with that I would have liked to see maybe like be a little bit more better implemented. But I think overall it was a really good time. It was really fun. I also enjoyed the two different kind of gameplay things in this game where you can go back and forth between action roguelike combat and then like base management. It made it to where I didn't feel like anything was stale the whole time I was playing it. I always had something different I could go between with a like smattering of a couple little mini games in there in the middle and some interesting like world building and lore and conversations. And so, yeah, for me, this is a solid B. I recommend it. I think it's fun. If you are listening to this somewhere in the future, I mean, I would still recommend this on the Switch. I think it was a good handheld experience. Hopefully, if you're listening to this in like 2023 or beyond, like they've fully patched everything out and it's like flawless performance-wise. But yeah, I had a really good time with it. Would definitely recommend it. Aubrey, I guess you can kind of give us your review and progress where you're feeling now at this point.
It's sitting at a B for me right now. I like the base building and the resource management elements. I do think I can already feel that kind of steep slope into, oh, everything's easy now, which I don't love. It doesn't necessarily feel earned per se. I think the biggest thing that's like camping it at B, and I haven't quite pinned down exactly why, but I can already tell that this probably isn't what I'm going to return to.
Right.
Which for me, as someone who likes circling back to games that I've played in the past, like almost every podcast episode I'm on, I mention I'm replaying Spiritfarer. Apparently that is my Witcher 3.
You just like to cry.
I do. It's so good. Animal Crossing, like I've played Mass Effect Andromeda several times, and that's an objectively not good game. So I don't know exactly why it's like not reaching that status for me. It's something I can't quantify.
Well, I think once you hit the like I've done it point in this game, I'm there with you. I guess I can't necessarily quantify, but it's like I don't feel like I want to do it again. Like I did it.
Yeah, it doesn't. It's almost like there's not so much a satisfaction to things getting easier, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, I feel about it in very much the same way I feel about Animal Crossing, where it's like I built pretty much everything in Animal Crossing. I paid off my house, and then I was kind of like, all right, I'm done. Like for me, for the most part, like there, I feel very much about this, where it's just kind of like, all right, I'm done. It hasn't overstayed its welcome, but I also don't know that I want to play. I think they have a roadmap of like they're gonna be doing some things with it in the future, some
more Cult of the Lamb
stuff.
stuff coming,
And so like it's one of those where I may look at it next year or something like that, or after some of those come out, and at that point I may be like, oh, let me jump in and do some of this newer stuff.
Yeah, there's fresh content.
Yeah, I was hanging around at that like solid like A- just because I can't figure out quite why I don't want to like replay it. But what set it at the B for me is the fishing mechanic is the Stardew Valley fishing mechanic.
Who played that and was like, we need more of this?
And that is a needlessly painful way to fish in video games.
Yes.
So that for me was enough. Like I feel like I'm damaging the buttons on my Switch.
Don't you just hold them down?
Well, you hold, but sometimes you gotta like lightly mash, and sometimes it'll shoot way up or drop way down, or it's the worst kind of fishing mechanic. And so that's that.
If for some reason you are a developer and you are listening to this and you are putting a fishing mechanic in your game and you played Stardew Valley or this game, don't put that fishing mechanic in your game. Come up with any other fishing mechanic even a bad fishing mechanic would be better than the god-awful, terrible fishing mechanic that is Stardew Valley's one.
So the game is an A to B from the effing gamers. The fishing mechanic gets an F.
Yeah, fishing mechanic. Well, no, I'd give this one a D- because it is easier than
Than Stardew
Valley.
I didn't ever lose a fish or have a problem in this one, so I feel like
No, I never lost a fish.
Yeah, I don't know if you can lose fish. I never let it just
took
run
too
out.
freaking long to reel in some of the
Some of
fish.
them, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, A, B game, D, F fishing mini game. With that, let's go ahead and roll into our closing segment for this episode. Dylan, you're hosting the game for this one. What are we doing?
We are. I have a little trivia game.
Ooh, a little trivia.
There will be light spoilers for games in this, or sometimes massive spoilers.
No dark spoilers.
So if
Dark mode only.
if for some reason you're like, no, I don't like spoilers, we talked about it at the beginning.
Why are you still here?
Well, yeah,
I'm going to cut all this so it seems like you don't care about people's feelings.
but there, and I can't even give you like an adequate warning because basically the answer, like the thing that I would warn you is the answer to the question. So like,
just listen, don't be a baby.
yeah.
Oh, before I forget, what did y'all name your colts?
Effing gamers.
I can't say yet.
Ah. What about you, Aubrey?
I got really stumped when it came up because
So
I wasn't even thinking
That's
about
why
it at
I
all.
went effing gamers.
So I just changed the A to an I, and so it was Cult of the Limb.
Cult of the Limb. Interesting. Okay.
I mean, I work with people who don't have limbs, so
Yeah.
Dylan,
felt
what is this?
apropos.
What is this game?
So it's a trivia game and it's cult themed.
So
So
Aubrey's going to win.
maybe we'll see. All right. So I think hopefully these are roughly in a easier to harder order, but I don't know.
Depends on where he sourced his answers from.
He got it from Google.
So first question. Appearing in the first rock band, which cult told us not to fear the Reaper?
Blue Oyster Cult.
I don't know which one of you was first.
And we can't blame that on the lag.
No. That is also what I named my cult. I named it the Blue Oyster Cult.
That's a good
good choice.
Good call. Yeah,
Solid
that's
choice.
Yes.
the best name of the three.
All right. So
So we're still at 0.
we'll give you guys a tie for that one. The sleeping god Cthulhu that cults are often trying to summon in games like Sinking City and Call of Cthulhu was created by who?
H.P. Lovecraft.
Yeah,
Aubrey's got a point.
I don't know what the H or P stand for.
Harry Potter.
Howard Phillip, I think.
Harry Potter Lovecraft.
Okay.
You're a Cthulhu, Harry.
You're at an unimaginable horror, Harry. I cannot comprehend you.
In the game Dead Space and its sequels, a cult trying to bring about an event known as the Convergence ultimately causes the outbreaks of wow. Ultimately causes the outbreaks of the necromorphs. They are loosely based off of which real-world cult? Not the necromorphs, the Church of Unitology.
Was it the Manson family?
Nope.
Ooh.
So the cult is known as the Church of Unitology in the game.
The Church of Scientology?
Scientology?
Correct. They are loosely based off of the Church of Scientology.
Man, I
In the
hope
Dead
Tom
Space
Cruise
games.
isn't listening to this.
I don't think we have to worry about that. But yes, so they are the reason all of the Dead Space games happen, basically. So
So they did something good.
Scientology trying to bring about?
No, but they believe a lot of weird things that were written by.
Okay, so they were like, well, let's take this cult and add this.
Well, and there's just a lot of like the way that the Unitologists are set up in Dead Space is very like similar in ways that Scientology is set up. So, all right. The Children of Atom, a cult in Fallout, worships what?
Atom.
So it's spelled ATOM.
Nuclear power. A nuclear bomb?
A nuclear bomb.
I haven't played the Fallout
I was
games,
going to say,
Yeah.
but that does make
it
sense.
pays to just think out loud.
Yeah. Oh, I thought you had played Fallout.
I played Fallout 4 about
the
halfway.
Okay. I thought you played 3 as well.
No.
So, yes,
That makes sense.
in like the first town you go to in Fallout 3, there's a cult there there's an unexploded nuclear bomb that their town is built around, and they worship the bomb. And the big choice that you can make is like,
To set
do
it
you
off.
detonate the bomb or do you not? So,
Yeah, I don't know a lot about cults in general.
all right. So now we will jump into a lot of the rest of these are like, what game is this cult from?
Okay.
And hopefully you can. So, which cult classic video game has you entering the mental worlds of other campers to help them resolve psychological issues?
Oh, I know the game. I just can't think of the name. Hold on. No.
To me, to the minds of other campers.
I can see it.
A sequel recently came
Yes.
out on
Was
Game
it
Pass.
Psychonauts?
It is Psychonauts.
God.
Man, Aubrey is like 4 points ahead of you.
I
at
could
this
see
point.
the cover art. I could not remember the name of the game. Ugh.
Well, here's one. Here's one for you.
The Witcher.
A cult worships a broken robot known as His Grace and attacks the player to help it ascend to godhood. In which game?
Near Automata.
Correct. There you go. There's a point for
I
you.
was thinking Borderlands.
Claptrap the god.
The reformation of the Los Illuminados cult that worships a parasite named Plagas led to a biohazardous outbreak in which game?
Resident Evil.
7. Just Resident Evil.
Resident Evil 8 is where the Los Plagas came from, though, right?
8 is the origin of it. I'll give it to you. Technically, Los Illuminados was from Resident Evil 4, but you both went down the correct Resident Evil path. So
I said Resident Evil 7 first, but she
Yes.
said the correct game.
yeah. So 8 is technically where
Where
it
they
started,
explain
and then
its
it went to
origins.
4, and then 7 happened or something, or
Like the
well, 8
explain the origins of
and
the
then
We do
cult.
not have time
So
to
they
go through
worship
the
it in the
timeline of
fourth-
Resident Evil.
They worshipped it in the 4th one.
That
Yes.
series
they did
is-
very obvious.
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So he can have that for Resident Evil then, because 4 is when that cult was introduced.
Thanks for the pity. It's what, like 2 to 5 at this point?
Yeah. Based in Montana, the
Far Cry 5.
Yes, the project at Eden's Gate is a cult you're on a mission to thwart.
Days Gone.
So,
That's set in
There's
Washington.
um,
Cult in that.
and why you
It's
may
set
have
in
thought of
Oregon.
Oh,
may
well, same difference.
the Black Goat is an entity that a cult was attempting to summon in an effort to revitalize their community. In which game?
Night in the Woods?
Correct. Night in the Woods.
Well, I was about to say Hunt Showdown. I had no idea.
And then the final question for just like
Posterity.
Posterities.
Yeah, just for fun.
Portrayed in the movie Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, the Manson cult believed that there were prophetic messages in the lyrics of which Beatles song?
Helter Skelter?
Helter Skelter.
Good job, Aubrey.
Trying to bring about the end of days.
I'm just glad I
Through
didn't get
racism.
0.
Yeah. I threw
You're cultier than me.
I threw a Nier Automata one and a Far Cry 5 one in there because I was like, Andrew would probably get these ones.
Okay. I'm going to cut that. cut that.
No pity, we die like men.
Well, and there was a lot where I was like, Andrew will know these games more, but Aubrey might know the
cult,
cult game aspect of them, / maybe has like played them or done a YouTube / Wikipedia deep dive on the story of these games. I was like, I don't think Aubrey has played Resident Evil, but she might have watched Markiplier play it. So
Yeah, exactly.
A couple times. It was a pretty fun playthrough. Did a great job. And then I watched like 4 different 4-hour-long explaining the lore of Resident Evil.
Yes.
What a waste of time.
Yeah, I was going to say, sounds like fun. Well, Aubrey, thank you so much for joining us on this episode. Thank you for contributing to our culty conversation here. Is there anything that you want to plug, say, shout out as we wrap this thing up?
Make good choices and be kind to one another.
There you go.
And subscribe to Effing Gamers. Give them a 5-star review.
Yep. Reviews and comments and likes, all that on YouTube and podcast services. Dylan, is there anything you want to say as we bring this thing to a close?
No, thanks for listening. And yeah, that's all I have.
Absolutely. As far as housekeeping, for sure, we are committed to putting out fun, awesome content on YouTube. And if you enjoy it, definitely give us a actual like or comment, because that helps a lot with the algorithm. Same thing for podcast services. If you actually leave like a 5-star rating or a review, that helps a lot with helping us reach a broader audience. Outside of that, we're moving towards Halloween, and I think that the episode we have coming out on that day is going to be a lot of fun, so definitely stay tuned for that.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, outside of that, thank you everybody so much for listening, and we'll catch you on the next episode. We hope you enjoyed listening to this episode of the Friendly Neighborhood Gamers podcast. If so, we would greatly appreciate your help in growing the show and the community by giving us a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and any other podcasting app that allows it.
We also have some great videos on our YouTube channel, including reviews, rankings, and other topics. We would really appreciate you checking it out. And if you want to keep up with everything going on in the neighborhood, follow us on Instagram and Twitter, and feel free to jump in our Discord server.
We hope to see you there. Links for everything are in the podcast description. Thanks again for listening, and remember,
Stay friendly, gamers.